Currently, I am engaged. So
Nice.
That's very, very exciting. I was experimenting with trying different things and failing a lot. I hated it. I was very fearful of specifically death.
When did you really say, okay, I'm like actually gonna follow this guy named Jesus now?
Why does this guy care so much about me? And it just blew my mind. I was like, wow, this is what I recognized as different, and this is what led me to Jesus.
Shout out.
Don't be afraid to face God. You need to face God. Completely changed my life.
How has it been, okay, actually following Jesus? Guys listening that are single, what maybe should they be looking for? Being engaged, there's not too many guys, I would say, that are engaged as Christians. It's a finite period of time, right? Like you're single, you're dating, engaged, probably the shortest, and then you're married. So being engaged, what advice might you have?
Challenge yourself constantly.
You have to be a little bit patient.
I felt like I was in a hole looking up.
The whole idea is you have to become content in singleness.
I'd be lying if I said I haven't fired off some Instagram DMs.
The word dating is not mentioned in the Bible.
I dedicated my life at Tomorrow World to Jesus.
Welcome to the Single Man Podcast, where we delve into candid conversations with Christian men about their journey to faith, advice for their younger selves, and navigating dating. With a heart to reach men from all walks of life, dive into real stories of redemption, growth, and the hope found in following Jesus. I'm your host, Carlton French, a 29-year-old single Christian, and I'm excited for you to listen to this week's episode. Let's jump into it. It's Carlton French. You're listening to the Single Man Podcast. We're back with another episode this week, here with my good friend Logan Harris. Logan, how are you doing today, man?
Hey, Carlton. I'm doing great today. How are you?
I'm doing excellent. Thank you for coming on. I'm excited to get to share some of your story with the audience, and hopefully it will be encouraging to single men listening.
Yeah, I'm really excited. Can't wait to jump in.
Quick backstory. Logan and I are part of the same men's Bible study through our church here in Atlanta. And Logan's been one of my best friends, and he's such a great display of the Lord and his relationship history and his journey to faith, I think, is really encouraging. So that's why I wanted to have him come on and share with some of the audience today. You mind, Logan, just kind of explaining your background and what you do for work, how old you are, your relationship status?
Of course. I'm 25, and currently I am engaged. So
nice.
That's very, very exciting. It's been a very exciting season in my life. And for work, right now I'm currently working for a company called Hatbag Lloyd. They're a logistics company. They own a lot of ships and containers, and I develop digital robots for them.
Okay. What does that mean, digital robots?
Yeah, so it's basically automating people's daily mundane tasks. So the mundane tasks that people have to do, clicking in the same way, doing the same repetitive actions for an hour sometimes. We basically take those actions and have a robot do that so they can do more human tasks that are needed in the company. So basically saving people a lot of time.
Okay. Love it. And what's been your favorite and least favorite part of this last week?
Ooh. Of this last week, I would say on Monday, we had our men's night, and I really, really enjoy just speaking to other believers and sharing about my life. I feel that having that community and having that outlet of sharing my life story has really allowed me to grow in my relationship with the Lord, and feeling that sense of community is really been impactful on my life. So I always enjoy our Monday night groups.
Yeah.
And also, I bought my wedding band this weekend, which was really, really exciting, going shopping for that.
Okay.
So I was really excited to pick that out. I've been looking forward to that for a long time.
Yeah. That's awesome. Was it a long process?
No, unlike my fiance who's still shopping. Mine took about 20 minutes. I definitely knew what I wanted. I just wanted a simple gold ring.
Okay. Love it. We'll touch more on your fiance and whatnot later. Jumping into things, Logan, how did you kind of come to know Jesus, and, what was your upbringing like, your story? Did you grow up in church? Like, when did you really say, okay, I'm like actually going to follow this guy named Jesus now?
Yeah. So I'm actually not from Atlanta, Georgia. I'm from Holly Springs, North Carolina. And I moved there when I was 5. And Holly Springs at that time was less than 10,000 people. So it was definitely a bit outside of Raleigh, so definitely rural. And I grew up going to a Methodist church, but a pretty traditional Methodist church. So every Sunday we would dress up in really nice button down slacks, and all throughout my younger childhood in elementary school, I hated it. Hated getting dressed up. The church was like 25 minutes away, and I hated the long drive. So me and my younger brother made it very difficult for my parents to go to church. And so we ended up stopped going to church when I was in 5th grade. And 6th grade year, we shopped around for some new churches, but didn't end up finding any and just didn't go. So in 7th grade year was when my life completely changed. I actually got invited to go to a Wednesday night gathering of middle schoolers by a not complete stranger, but basically a complete stranger on my school bus. I still remember her name to this day, Samantha Momfelt. And
Shout out
Samantha Momfelt. The only reason I went is because Samantha Momfelt was friends with my crush at the time, Grace Jackson. Shout out. But these people were the reason why I went to this event called Hazardous. We have something similar at Passion City called The Rising. So it was, we went to a close local spot in Holly Springs, and there was 50 middle schoolers there. And I was like, whoa, there's a ton of people here. And was just so excited at that. And we hopped on a bus, went to the main location in Raleigh, and it was like a rock concert. I'd never, seen anything like that. I was used to the pews and the choir and the gowns and the traditional style of church. And this was my first exposure to this modern style of worship. And it just blew my mind. I was like, wow, I can do this on a Wednesday night? Like, that's crazy during the week. And then afterwards, they sent us home with candy, and we played basketball and video games before. And of course, there was like a 5-minute message in there, but I was like, wow, this is amazing. I have to go back. So then I just started going week after week. And then eventually I found out that they were meeting in the local high school, in Holly Springs High School. So I, of course, dragged my parents to that. I was like, this church is awesome. We have to go and check it out. And we were church shopping like a year before. So my parents went and checked it out, and they're still going to this day and serving in that church.
Wow.
But I would say when my life really changed is when I started going to the church, and I got plugged into the small group ministry there, because again, I didn't like sitting in the main service because it brought back memories of just a guy up there preaching. even though the worship was different. So I got plugged into a small group there, and my leader, Derek Taylor, completely changed my life. He showed me kindness, and I would say joy was the big difference in him. He cared so much for me and wanted to see me back, and challenged me as well every week to read a different section of the Bible, to look into this, look into that, explore for myself. And that's where I kind of got the intrigue of, why does this guy care so much about me? And that's who really changed my life. And that's when my life really started to open up to the idea that, hey, there's this guy, Jesus, that actually loves me, and he can impact other people's lives to make them joyful and want to help others realize who Jesus is.
Yeah. So how old were you when that happened?
I was in 7th grade.
Okay.
So that would be 12 was when I first got in to that church. I think 13 when I fully accepted Christ and was a part of the small group, and really, I guess, accepted the love of Jesus, and had my life completely changed by Derek in that small group.
Okay. So 13, you put your faith in Jesus. Now you're 25. Has it just been like sunshine and rainbows since then, or like, how has it been? Okay, actually following Jesus for the last 12 years.
Yeah, definitely not all sunshines and rainbows, for sure. I would say the big change for me was peace when I accepted Jesus. Before I accepted Jesus, I was very fearful of specifically death. I had nightmares about it. It was very hard for me to go to sleep at night. It was something that me and my mom talked about a lot, and something that I would say when I accepted Jesus, I had so much peace and so much comfort from that, and something that was like a death to life in my life at the time. I would say when it came to putting into practice Jesus's teachings and ideas, obviously I'm still doing that to this day, but those came a lot later in my life than. But I would say the real difference for me was at that time was the peace that I had in my life, to where I could actually live my life without the fear of death and fear in general.
That's great. Yeah, I love like the peace that following Jesus gives you. So that's awesome. You were able to learn that at the age of just 12, and to be continuing to put it into practice now. I think you do a great job of that. So I'm curious, like, most of the audience is, in their early 20s age range. Some are following Jesus, some aren't. If you were to give advice to yourself when you were kind of in that, 20s, early 20s age range, what would you give to your younger self, saying like, okay, you're following Jesus, but what do you wish you knew then that you know now about it?
Gotcha. I'll give a little, I guess, context and backstory of my answer first before I give it. But I want to start with, my life wasn't all sunshines and rainbows after following Jesus, especially during my college years. I wouldn't say shied away from the faith, but my actions weren't lining up with Jesus's teachings, and I was ashamed of some of the things that I was doing in my relationships, and not actively pursuing a community of faith, and honestly wanting to experience the college culture and the freedom that I was getting in college of being my own person and trying to do it myself instead of relying on God to direct my paths.
Yeah.
I had this newfound freedom, and I wanted to explore that and try to do things on my own. So I was experimenting with trying different things and failing a lot, and not reaching out to my parents or even talking to my parents for 3-4 months at a time in college because I just wanted to do it my own way. And that harbored a lot of shame and a lot of, I don't want to face God. And so that's what I would tell my younger self, is now that I'm in a community of believers and I'm plugged into the church and I'm spending time in God's word, currently in my life, I'm facing God and coming to him daily with my problems and struggles. If I were to talk to my younger self, I would say, don't be afraid of God. Face God. Even though you have that shame and that guilt of what you're doing, is wrong. Don't be afraid to search God out in that and, face him, and don't run away from him. Because when you face him and when you search for accountability and discipline and changing your actions, that's where the peace comes back into your life and the fear leaves. So that's the one piece of advice I would give to my younger self.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I agree. I think it's a lot of shame that people can have, and especially young men, where we don't know why we're doing certain actions. It's just, okay, this is what the world's doing. And so growing up in the faith and growing up in church gives you some foundation, but when your foundation shakes for something new, like going to college or being away from your parents or moving to a new city where you don't know anybody, I feel like that's when a lot of young men, me included, like didn't know where to turn to. And so just, okay, well, this is what the world's preaching, so let me just do this, instead of, oh, there's like other men, there's another way, like I can be a Christian, I can pursue God. So yeah, that's awesome. I think the audience would be interested to know like how you've navigated dating and relationships throughout your life to this point. You're engaged now, which is awesome. How did that come about? Like, did you wait until like this relationship to start dating, or have you dated previously? Like, what's that kind of been like?
Yeah. So I have dated previously. All my relationships were when I was a Christian. My first relationship was senior year of high school. I've only had 3 major relationships, and those relationships were all very long term. I tried to back then in my mind focus on somebody that had that type of joy that Derek had. That's what I tried in my mind to envision. That was my first criteria of, this person has to have that type of joy that only Christ can bring. And so all of my 3 major relationships, the girls were in some aspects following Christ and proclaiming to be Christians. But as myself, they weren't acting out and having the Christian community and accountability in that time to actually live out Christ's teachings, which I think is obviously very difficult in that time of your life when you're going into college and you have all this newfound freedom. So that brings, you guys try, drinking, I had sex before marriage. I had that's where a lot of the shame and guilt came from. Was I was scared to face God about what I was doing sexually into my own body. So that shame and that guilt that I had in those relationships was something that was very challenging going forward into my current relationship and to other relationships, but was something that I wasn't being obedient to, and that was putting a wall between me and God that was very hard to break down. But I would say also in all of these three relationships, a big factor of why they didn't work out was long distance. I had the notion that since I had sex with this girl, she then had to be my wife. That kind of traditional church value of you only have the only person you're supposed to have sex with is your wife.
Right.
And so I misconstrued it. And so eventually life circumstances happened. The relationship, my three major relationships went into long distance, and then they just broke down from lack of communication. But also, since I had sex with these women, they, when you go long distance, that also puts a barrier in between you and the girl, and between you and God. So you're fighting that battle and it's something that I think really impacted me in trying to face God in that time.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I'm curious, you said you had 3 relationships. So the one that you're in now, where you're engaged, is that one of the 3, or that's after those 3?
That's after those 3.
After those 3. Okay. So what has been different this 4th relationship now, where you're engaged, where you've been able to get to that step compared to the previous 3 where they didn't work out?
Yeah. The big difference, I would say, is number 1, our initial commitments to each other on what we want this relationship to be. And from the start, we set out that the only reason we're even in this relationship is for marriage. And going really deep early helps in that, and setting out your expectations of what you're looking for. And so from the get-go, we said we are waiting until marriage to have sex. We're waiting until marriage to really get intimate and with each other and break that kind of unbreakable barrier that is put there by God. And once you go past that, it's very hard to then see things rationally. And I think being able to go through this relationship without that cloud or that distortion in the relationship has made it very, very easy for me to have the peace that I experienced earlier in my life in this relationship, to when I'm looking to go to the next step in the relationship. I don't have this distorted look of the relationship. I have a clear vision, a clear mind, and I can logically make decisions, and I can actually talk to God about what to do, because I don't have this shame and this guilt to where I can't face God and I can't ask him for help and guidance, to where I'm ashamed or afraid to do that. I now have God in my corner to where I can talk to him and ask him, hey, is this what I'm supposed to be doing? Am I supposed to take the next step with this girl? Am I supposed to, ask for her hand in marriage, to go buy a ring? These are the questions that you eventually have to ask yourself when your goal is, from the start, to get married And when you can go to God and talk to God about those questions, it's so much simpler, and you get so much peace and comfort when you eventually do go and ask those questions. So that's the big difference, and honestly the reason that I'm engaged now. If we had sex right off the get-go, there's no way I would have been able to go and talk to God about, oh, should I take this next step? Should I not? I would be stuck in that limbo zone of, I don't have my maker to confirm that decision. So I'm never going to make that decision like I did in the past. I spent over 2 years with my first girlfriend and over a year with my other 2 relationships, and never felt that, oh, I need to commit, because I don't have direction in my life and in that relationship, because I'm not talking to God, my creator.
Right. Okay. I'm interested as well as a follow-up. So the relationship you have now where you're engaged, what was it about the girl you're engaged to when you first met her that you were like, okay, I want to actually pursue her? Like, guys listening that are single, what maybe should they be looking for other than that joy you mentioned earlier?
Yeah. I would say similar to the joy is, does this girl model what Jesus is to you? So to me, when I think of Jesus and the model of Jesus, the 2 people I think about is Derek Taylor and my mother. Those are the 2 people to me who in this real life physical world that have embodied the principles and teachings of Jesus the best to me. So whoever that person is to you, obviously these people are not perfect, but I have certain memories of my mother and certain memories of Derek that stand out to me, that are, this is what I recognized as different, and this is what led me to Jesus. I want to see those memories and those actions that they took in my future wife. So those style of memories is what I saw in my fiancée, and I saw the joy, and I saw the acts of love, the acts of service that she was giving to her community, to other people around her, and to me when I had interactions with her. And so it left me wondering, why is she doing this? Why is she going the extra mile? Why is she serving me? Why is she loving me so well? Why is she so joyful around people? To then be curious to ask the question of, I want to know this person more, because why are they like this? And those memories and those people and those qualities are what you should be looking for in people, and what makes you ask those questions and want to know somebody more. So yeah, that'd be my advice.
Yeah, that's great. I think we'll wrap up with being engaged. There's not too many guys, I would say, that are engaged as Christians. It's a finite period of time, right? Like, you're single, you're dating, engaged, probably the shortest, and then you're married. So being engaged, what advice might you have to guys listening who are considering engagement, or maybe they're engaged themselves now? Like, how have you been navigating wedding planning and preparing for marriage? Any tips on that?
Any tips? My tip would be to, hopefully you have a wife that is very enthusiastic about getting married. I'm so blessed and so thankful for my fiancée. She's been all over marriage. So when it comes to wedding planning, she's taken the heavy load on that. I'll be the first one to say it. So I've definitely helped her and given my input. I would say she should be obviously she should be very excited and happy, and everybody says it's their day and they've been dreaming of this their whole life.
Right.
But the thing I've been conscious of is giving my opinion. And when she can't make a decision, there's so much that she has decided on, but when she can't make a decision or needs my input on something, be sure to give that. It's not just her day, it's also your day. So be sure to give your opinion, and also don't be afraid to make tough decisions when she can't do them herself or can't make up her mind. So definitely let her run with it and go with it. It's definitely taken the workload off of me. So but also it's really given us time to come together and see how regular communication is going to be. When you're planning a wedding, you have to talk about finances. You have to talk about family situations, of who's going to come, who's going to sit with who. Do we invite these people? Do we invite those people? You get to kind of test drive these very difficult areas of conversation that you're going to have during marriage. And it can bring up very interesting situations and arguments. So be ready for that. Be prepared for that. And be willing to go through those and talk about those hard things that you need to talk to plan a wedding. But also know why you guys are getting married in the first place. Always remember why you're getting married in the first place. Go back to that if you are struggling. But it should be a big time of joy, of blessing. Very busy, but it is kind of that test drive of when you have kids. When you're married, you talk about finances, about family, about, do we go to this person's house for Thanksgiving, for Christmas? All those things start to come up, and It's a very kind of that test drive period where you really get your first stresses of what marriage is going to be like. So just embrace it, but also remember why you made that commitment in the first place. And don't be afraid to go and keep being consistent and talking to God through that. Having that, I know it's hard to, you're not married yet, so you don't want to become so intimate and dependent on each other and read the Bible 24/7 with each other and pray together, because you're not technically one yet. Obviously you want to be doing that during marriage, so there still needs to be some sort of separation, but do come together and do start to create still strengthen the friendship, still date while you're engaged. That's something that when we just became engaged, we kind of stopped doing, because we were focused on wedding planning, and you've got a ton of things coming into your life right when you get engaged. So we didn't go on a date for a month and a half, 2 months, and we're like, wow, we haven't sat down and really dated and talked to each other for a while. So that's another big thing, that still date each other while you're engaged and married. It's going to be a very busy time, but still date each other, still talk, still have that connection together, and don't be afraid to go to God together as well through all that.
Yeah. Great wisdom, Logan. Thank you so much. Last question, and then we'll wrap up. So if there's single men listening, they're, not in a relationship. Okay, I just listened to this whole podcast. This is awesome to hear this guy Logan's story. I don't know him personally, but I want to take one thing away from what he had to tell me on this episode. What is one thing you want all the single men specifically listening to take away?
Yeah. I've said it a few times, but the one thing is, don't be afraid to face God. You need to face God. He will guide your actions. He will eliminate your fears. He is the solution to all your problems. You need to be able to face God and be able to have a creator and the person who created you to talk to during your struggles, during your times of hardship, through all of the disciplines that you need to develop in yourself. Don't be afraid to face God with your shame, with your disappointments in your life, with any sort of issues or problems you have. Don't be afraid to go to God with that.
Awesome, man. So grateful for you, Logan, and for you spending this time here with the Single Man podcast, and excited for your engagement and your marriage, and we'll be continuing to pray for you and your relationship and continued obedience to the Lord. So thank you for coming on today, and thank you everyone for listening. I hope that this encouraged you. If you got something out of it, you think it might be helpful for a friend of yours, I would just encourage you to send them the link and tell them to check out this podcast. Check out this guy, Logan. I think he might have some similarities to your story if there's a single friend of yours. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next week for the next episode. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Single Man Podcast. If someone you know would benefit from this week's episode, I'd love for you to text them the link and invite them to listen. You never know how a simple invitation could change someone's life. We'll be back next Friday at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific, with a new episode. Until then, check out the video version of the podcast on YouTube, and you can engage with us on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook.